You know, some stories, they just take on a life of their own. And in the world of modern horror, there aren't many stories more alive than the one about a doll named Annabelle. But here's the thing, this doll, she's got more than one face. And today, we're gonna unmask all three.
Wow. I mean, think about that. The single most haunted artifact in existence. That is a heavy reputation for any object, right? Let alone a kid's toy. That one sentence right there, it just sets the stage for a story that has absolutely terrified millions of people.
So yeah, they're talking about a doll, and you probably already have an image in your head, right? The movie doll. Cracked face, that creepy evil stare. But here's the twist. That's just one part of the story. That's just one of her faces. And the other stories? They're way more complex, and maybe, just maybe, even more unsettling.
All right, so let's start with the face we all know, the Hollywood creation, the movie monster that was literally designed from the ground up to give you nightmares.
So she first popped up in The Conjuring back in 2013, and man, she was such a hit that she launched her own little cinematic universe, 3 spin-off movies. The filmmakers themselves said they wanted a terrifying porcelain doll that is disfigured and immediately menacing. And that was a very deliberate choice, you know? They specifically designed her to be way more unsettling than the doll she was supposedly based on.
Okay, so here's a really cool piece of the movie lore that I think a lot of people miss. The doll itself, it isn't actually possessed. It's what they call a conduit. Seriously, think of it like a paranormal Wi-Fi hotspot for evil spirits. It's just a beacon that lets other nasty things come through, cause chaos, and look for a human host. So in the movies, it's not the doll you're really afraid of, it's what the doll attracts.
All right, let's leave Hollywood behind for a minute. It's time to dive into the world of the real-life paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. This is where we uncover the second face of Annabelle, the paranormal legend.
Okay, just look at this. On one side, you've got the movie monster we all know. And on the other, it's a Raggedy Ann doll. A classic, store-bought toy. No cracked porcelain, no evil grin, just yarn hair and button eyes. And honestly, that's what makes the legend so much more chilling, right? This idea of pure evil hiding behind a totally innocent face.
So the story that the Warrens told, it's like a classic ghost story. It kicks off in the 1970s. A student nurse, Donna, gets this Raggedy Ann doll as a gift. Pretty soon, the doll starts moving around the apartment on its own. Freaky, right? So they call on a psychic who tells them, oh, it's inhabited by the spirit of a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins. But then, the Warrens show up. They investigate and say, nope, this is no little girl's ghost. This is a demonic entity manipulating the doll. And just like that, they take the doll and lock it up in a glass case in their occult museum.
And according to Ed and Lorraine, this innocent little doll was responsible for some seriously terrifying stuff. We're talking cryptic notes written on parchment paper, physically attacking one of the owner's friends, leaving like bleeding scratches on him, and the stories just get crazier. They even claimed a priest who taunted the doll got into a near-fatal car crash right after leaving their museum. With every single story, the legend just grew and grew.
Okay, so these are some pretty wild claims, but they bring up an even bigger question. What if the doll isn't haunted at all? What if all that horror is really just in our heads? And that brings us to the third face of Annabelle. This one has nothing to do with demons or ghosts. It has to do with something way more fundamental, the way our own brains are wired.
So for this part, we're going to turn to science and a little bit of skepticism to try and figure out how a simple doll could become the focus of so much fear.
Believe it or not, the fear of dolls is a real thing. It's called pediophobia. And a big reason for it is something called the uncanny valley. You've probably felt it before. It's when something looks almost human, but not quite. It's just a little bit off, and our brains just freak out. It's like a glitch in our human recognition software that screams, something's wrong here. Just check this out. It's a perfect example. A researcher 3D printed this doll, and with its hair all messy, people described it as creepy. But then they just gave it a little haircut, and suddenly it wasn't threatening anymore. It just goes to show you how razor-thin that line is between something familiar and something really frightening. A doll like Annabelle can cross that line so easily.
Now you combine that uncanny valley feeling with something else we all do naturally, animism. We're just hardwired to see faces in clouds, to yell at our computers. We project human emotions and intentions onto things that aren't alive. So when an object is already in that uncanny valley, we don't project friendly feelings onto it, we project malice. And a simple Raggedy Ann doll, with that vague, fixed expression, It's the perfect blank canvas for us to paint all of our darkest fears onto. And, from a skeptical point of view, the whole Annabelle legend is on pretty shaky ground. Science writer Sharon A. Hill makes a great point. We have nothing but Ed Warren's word for all of this stuff. The entire history of the doll's evil deeds, the origins of the objects in the museum, it all comes from one source. There's just no independent, verifiable evidence to back it up.
In fact, a lot of academics just see the Annabelle story as a perfect example of modern folklore. Religious studies professor Joseph Laycock suggests it's not really unique. He connects it to this long tradition of other haunted doll stories, like Robert the Doll, or even a classic Twilight Zone episode. The idea is that the story just fits perfectly into a horror template that already existed in our culture.
So whether you think it's fact or folklore, one thing is for sure. The story of Annabelle is more powerful today than it's ever been. It's become this living, breathing modern myth that's still evolving right in front of us.
And that myth has real power. You can see it here. I mean, even experienced paranormal investigators, people who do this for a living, admit that they're genuinely scared to be in the same room as the doll. The story itself has just become that potent.
And like I said, the story is still unfolding. In 2019, the Warrens' famous occult museum had to close down. Then, in 2025, a paranormal investigator who promoted tours for the doll died unexpectedly. And then, just a month after that, comedian Matt Rife bought the Warrens' home and the entire collection, which means he is now Annabelle's new owner. The legend is literally still being written today.
So, when we ask, what is Annabelle? The answer isn't simple. She's not just one thing. She is a Hollywood movie monster. She is a paranormal legend. And she is a fascinating case study in the psychology of fear. All three of those faces, all three of those identities are real in their own way, and all of them contribute to her power. So that leaves us with one final thought. We spend all this time wondering what evil might be locked inside that glass box. But what if the most powerful, the most frightening thing isn't the doll at all? What if the real ghost in this whole affair is the story itself? A story so scary and so compelling that we just can't stop telling ourselves.